name is Bobby Srivastav. I'm a co-founder, chief product officer of Benikiva, and welcome to another episode of Unique Voices of Tech. I am so happy to have Abel on this call. And just before Abel does his introduction, a quick story on Abel. So I was new into this insurtech space. We had just founded Benikiva, launched in the marketplace back in 2018. And I'm looking for innovators in our insurtech space. And of course, I ran into Abel on LinkedIn. And then I saw him at my very first conference in Boston. And it was so nice that I was able to connect with you, learn a lot from you. And I'm so happy that you're on my podcast today, Abel.
Oh, Bobby, thank you. I absolutely appreciate the opportunity to catch up with you. Yeah, I remember, because I remember as we were talking, in the early days, you asked the question, hey, what other conferences should you go to as well, just to learn a lot about what's been happening in this insurtech space. And then I also had you on my podcast,
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, actually, as well. So it's exciting to get reconnected.
No, absolutely. So Abel, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization and your background.
Yeah, thank you. So I am Abel Travis. Right now, I'm the vice president of fundamental underwriters for a company called AF Group. My background is I've been in the insurance industry for quite some time myself. Starting off in underwriting, now leading sort of a division in a larger insurance organization. But in between all of that, I've done things all the way from being a chief underwriting officer through really driving innovation for the organization that I'm in. At the same time as really trying to help organizations and insurtechs and new entrants in the insurance industry understand the value proposition of what insurance actually is here to accomplish, and then how they can help to accomplish well. So, I'm very excited to just really talk about what's happening here in the industry.
Now that's awesome. In my show, I've had a series of startup founders and scale up founders. So I'm so happy to bring this unique voice around somebody that's actually worked for a carrier and mentor startups. So tell us a little bit about what are some areas that you see in the insurance space? Like, why did you get into insurance, Abel?
That's a great question. Interestingly enough, what I can tell you is I actually did not intend on coming into the insurance industry at all. About 17 years later, I'm still here. When I joined, I originally thought I was going to be an investment banker. So I had a job lined up after college, and I had a phone call from someone said, "Hey, why don't you come interview with this company?" I never heard of the company before. I'm like, okay, whatever. It was the Hartford. So when I got down into the office of the Hartford, there was actually someone from my alma mater that actually hired me into the industry, and she told me about what insurance is and a lot of the differences that I would gain between investment banking or coming into the insurance industry, and she really focused her attention on whether or not I wanted to have a work-life balance and wanted to start a family. So at that point, it took maybe 4 or 5 conversations, and I'm like, okay, what, let me try insurance. So I've been in the industry ever since then. And I got to tell you, Bobby, this is, I honestly believe that this is a great industry that as people are looking to come into it, there's opportunities all abound, where people may not necessarily know that there are things that they can get into. So from marketing, to HR and not necessarily only focused on actuarial and underwriting, especially those that are really inclined towards technology with what we've been seeing play out in this space with insurtech and organizations really trying to hone in on serving the customer through enhancing their technical capabilities. So, there's so much that can be accomplished within this industry. And that's really what kept my 17-year career in this industry going, not necessarily focusing on one specific things, but really looking for opportunities to transform different areas of the industry and applying my subject matter expertise there.
No, that's awesome. Awesome to know how you came into the industry. So for folks that are new to this industry, what is one piece of advice you would give to maybe somebody that's getting a role into the insurance industry?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think one piece of advice that I would give them is, don't necessarily focus on the specific role that you're getting into, right? I would just say look at the significant amount of opportunities that are available in our industry, and then figure out where your expertise and the value that you bring to the table can absolutely fit into providing services for your service and expertise for the company that you're working for. And I say that because I see a lot of individuals that come into insurance, and they may start off in one place, and then they may recognize that they have a significant amount of value and expertise to provide that can then help to support another area in an organization that they might not have thought of. So people that might have started in underwriting, for example, and then recognize that, hey, they love to build product, or people that might have started in sales and recognize that, hey, they love the value that technology brings to the industry, so they want to shift into that area. So really, focusing on the wider proposition of what the industry has to offer, and not necessarily become enamored with just one thing, and figure out where you can fit in other places.
No, that's awesome. And I know in your role, what are the types of customers do you serve, and what is the piece of advice you would give to your customers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in my particular role, so as I mentioned, I lead one of the divisions of AF Group called Fundamental Underwriters, and interestingly enough, I came in, and Fundamental Underwriters was started as a startup at AF Group back in 2018. And really, what it was meant to do was focus on bringing opportunities of to balance volatility through diversification to our organization. So when we started Fundamental, I came in roughly about 12 months after it was started. But the attention was focused on looking for large opportunities where there might have been a demand need and a supply gap, right? So we started with commercial trucking. When you think about what's happening in the commercial trucking space and so on, we've added products that's been focused on other industries like health and human services, and other types of capabilities and so on. The advice that I would give to customers, it really is, ensuring that they understand that not everything is just price related. And that they need to sort of, as they're working with the insurance organizations, or the start, or maybe the capacity providers from insurtechs that they're starting with, really to hone their attention on what's the value that those organizations can bring to them as a customer, right? So for example, we've historically seen a lot of opportunities where customers may have been challenged from a performance perspective, and losses and injury to workers, whereby good carriers are going to try to look for opportunities to mitigate the potential of injury to their employees, which then provides value to that customer, which will then allow them to better protect their employees. So an example of that could be, not necessarily just focusing on the price, but partner, but with an insurance company that may partner with an insurtech like a Make You Say, for example, that can provide some wearable capability to mitigate potential injury to the employees of that customer. You know what I mean? I think that's where customers should really be focusing their attention on. It's the value that the organizations that they're working with could provide to them.
Yeah, it's not a commodity. It needs to be like a holistic picture. Is
Absolutely.
what I've learned coming into this industry. It's so fascinating. So what advice would you give to a insurtech or a fintech organization?
Yeah. And first and foremost, I just want to sort of affirm what you just said, right? Because you're saying, it's not a commodity, and that is absolutely the case. And I'm sure, as you mentioned, that you're seeing that same thing with Benakiva, in terms of what you all are doing, and recognizing that, creating that long-term partnership and building that long-term rapport is really what's going to help to drive the overall engagement and value that you bring to the organization. So when we think about advice that I would give to startups, I think they're one of a few, right? I think first and foremost, interestingly enough, I find a lot of startups, instead of on the customer, focusing their attention on what the competition is doing, right? And fine, that's okay, right? Because you want to make sure that you're staying ahead of where the competition might be at in this industry. But frankly, if you're focused on what other people are doing, you're not necessarily going to put your attention towards what you can do better to provide value to your customer. So, that's one thing I would say is don't worry about what the competition is doing, because if you're providing true value, you're going to outpace what the competition is doing naturally. And that's really going to help you to really drive that true value prop that you may want to see and that customer needs based on the experience that they're looking to gain from engaging with an organization like yours. I think the other thing is, when you're looking at, what a customer is hoping to achieve, and, based on what you're offering, don't be so enamored with the product or the capability that you're offering in the way that it is today. I mean, what I've found over time is that a lot of organizations will you come into an RFP, or a lot of insurtechs may come into an RFP, for example, and say, okay, this and this and this is what we do, without necessarily listening to exactly what the customer that they're looking to serve needs are, right? So you can't be so enamored with the one or two or three things that you may want to come into the conversation with, and you really have to listen to what the customer is trying to accomplish, right? So that way you can provide a valued service in the long run to those customers. And then really, I think the last thing that I would mention is, you know, leverage your network as much as possible, and not necessarily just your network of folks that are going to be decision makers, but also those that you may be able to partner with that can help you achieve the long-term goal of your organization, right? There's especially when you're dealing with larger insurance companies, if we want to focus it on the insurance industry, where the sales cycle could be 18 to 24 months, right? I think what we find is that when insurtechs or new startups are coming to engage with insurance companies, unfortunately, insurance companies are hoping for those startups to be the one-stop shop for a lot of different things, right? And that's not realistic for a startup that may not necessarily be as well capitalized as a larger organization that insurance companies are used to working with, right? But what that startup can do is say, okay, well, hey, there's this other organization that's out there that I can partner with, and we can bring our capabilities together, even if it's not formalized, right? But in order to be able to serve the needs of this customer, right? And again, for me, and as we know, when you launch a company and when you're growing a company, it's all about not only growing that top line, but also maximizing the value that you can bring to the bottom line. And I think those are things that organizations can do in order to help to maximize that bottom line performance.
Now that is such a valid point, Abel. Like I cannot, I am in so much agreement with all your advice, and especially with the partner piece, because if you're doing B2B, sales cycles are long, and
Absolutely.
partnership is the way to go. And we've been fortunate in our journey that we have some very good partners. And I would say, don't even just, I wouldn't even discount partnership with other insurtechs, but the key is also the bigger players. So sometimes we look at the bigger players as like, oh, they have legacy tech. They're hungry for startups, just like the carriers are as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting because, again, you see a lot of carriers that are hungry, just to get access to the capability, right? But not necessarily understanding that, there might be a handful that they can partner with and pair together that can really help them to gain that capability. And then, of course, the insurtechs can get a lot of value from that as well.
Yeah. So Abel, what is your one big ask to this community?
Yeah, yeah. To the insurance community, and maybe what I'll just mention the insurtech community as well is, and this is something that's always been near and dear to me, especially in insurance. And just to be frank, insurance isn't necessarily the most diverse of an industry. And when you look at the top ranks of our industry, it does tend to be somewhat homogenous, which limits the ability to have that diversity of thought. So there's a couple of statistics that's out there, that shows that organizations that have diverse leadership are 45% more likely to lead themselves to profitability and 19% more likely to increase the bottom line gap. And I think that's really critical, right? Just in terms of continuing to be successful and growing an organization. So that one, my one ask of our industry is just to embrace change, and then embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion in all ranks throughout your organization, right? Because really there is a direct linkage to being able to grow your organization and maximize what you can bring to your bottom line. I just think that's so critical for our industry in terms of that change that I would hope we can see.
And this is, people oftentimes ask about this podcast. This is exactly my mission and vision, is to highlight unique voices. Because oftentimes, even in our industry, when we go to conferences, Abel, why did I fall in love with the industries? Because when I go to a conference, I see someone that looks like me
Absolutely.
in the stage, and I see Abel, I see other voices. And when we start to go to these events and just see the same folks, the same homogenous look, it's time for a change. And I love that. And I totally agree with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's absolutely necessary, and that it's not just an ask of the insurance industry. I would also say that I would extend that to investors in this industry and so on, right? Even when you look at where the dollars are going, I mean, of course, being well capitalized helps with longevity for organizations that are trying to grow in this space. And when you look at underrepresented founders in the insurance industry, the statistic for 2020 was only 2% of the funding dollars went to founders that were underrepresented in this space, even though the value that those founders bring to our industry may be equivalent to a significant higher impact, right? So yes, I think absolutely, I mean, I think that's another opportunity, extending that to anyone that's supporting this industry, because frankly, I do also think that customers at some point are going to demand that the organizations that they're spending their dollars in are representative of themselves too,
No, that's awesome. Yes. So, Abel, how do people get in touch with you? But before that, what events are you going to be attending this year? Do you have key events that you're looking at that you will participate in?
I do actually, and I'm really excited about what this year has to bring. So coming up in April, I will be attending and speaking at one of the InsurTech Hartford events up in Hartford, actually. So if you're there, I'm looking forward to getting an opportunity to connect with you in person. I have a couple of other events that I'll be speaking at as well. There's an upcoming NIA event later in February that I'll be speaking at, and that's really along the lines of the topic of D&I and technology in the insurance space and the value that brings. As well as, of course, later this year, I will be in attendance at InsurTech Connect in, I think, September or October of this year. So I'm definitely looking forward to that and seeing all of the wonderful faces that I just haven't had an opportunity to see, ever since the event went virtual. I know last year it came back to being in person, but now that it's we're another year removed from the pandemic, I think it'll be an opportunity to be able to get to see everyone in person during that time.
And how do people find you?
Yeah, so if you want to find me, the easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn. It's Abel Travis, and then also if you're interested in hearing the voices of folks like Bobby and others in the industry that's really focusing their attention on innovation and transformation, you can look up on any on podcasts, Apple or Spotify, or whatever it might be. It's called the Insurance Innovators Unscripted Podcast. So that's the best way to get in contact with me.
Awesome. Are you having more guests on that podcast?
Interestingly enough, I slowed it down a little bit over the last 2 years because of a lot of some changes in my day-to-day roles and everything. But I've actually started picking it back up. So in a couple of months, you all are going to start to see some newer episodes with new voices. That's representative of some of the more recent changes and transformations that we've been seeing in the industry. So it's been really exciting to see some of the other things, and also just to see InsurTech mature. And I'm looking forward to bringing that to folks.
Awesome. Oh, that's exciting. That's it. A lot of people have said, "Where is Abel Travis podcast?" And so glad that you're going to bring that up
Uh,
in full speed this year. Well, Abel, thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast, and hope to see you in Hartford. We'll be there. And until next time, everyone, with another unique voice of tech. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby.